we have one final speaker to wrap up the night, bring it all together. And you and I all know who he is. Ability to see the future and to be able to really paint a picture for people in terms of what's possible for both themselves personally and where we can go as a people. I think has really allowed so many people that I know in my organization to be able to hold things together through this crazy year of elections and chaos and everything else to a place where I think everyone's in a very optimistic mood as we move ahead. So I'm so happy to be able to introduce Mr. Tyler Libby. Tyler, take it away.
But basically, I want to give a history lesson. And I want to talk about the three most significant economic events that have happened in the last 102, 3, 4 years, something like that. And I want you to bear with me, okay? Because by the time I'm done, I'm going to show you how this relates to common sense and what you are now doing, all right? Now, I'm going to take you way back to the 19 teens when Woodrow Wilson was one early socialist. He was a big intellectual. I think he was the head of Columbia, one of the universities, okay? Big government guy. We just come off World War. Government was huge, okay? He decided we needed the first income tax. Thank you, Woodrow, right? Inflation was running rampant at 10%. Unemployment was 15%. I think it was an all-time high for that point in time. And anyway, things were really negative. And then on August 2nd, 1923, Warren Harding, okay, who was from Marion, Ohio, I believe. Warren Harding dropped dead of a heart attack out in California. And a silent guy that everybody called him Silent Cal from Vermont, Calvin Coolidge, my favorite president, comes in. In 2 years, he cuts government by 50%. 50% of all employees are gone. He cut the federal government. That created what you hear as the Roaring '20s. Okay, it was the fastest economic growth in the history of the world. I think it still stands as the fastest ever. All right, now move forward 50 years. We keep digging these same holes. In the 70s, the 1970s, we had stagflation, unemployment through the roof. We had interest rates as high as 21.5%. Jimmy Carter was our president. His State of the Union address one time, he wore a sweater. All right. And he talked about how Americans had to learn to, live on less and not expect so much. OK. And they must do less. I mean, it was called the speech of malaise of America or something like that. OK. Well, anyway, in the 70s, there was this emergent growth of a new organization that came out. OK. It was led by a guy who the press hated, much maligned. He was a second-rate, what is it called, Class B movie actor, a guy named Ronald Reagan. So through the 70s, particularly the late 70s, he had this grassroots thing that he was going around. He was doing a GE theater and all this kind of stuff. Well, anyway, November 5th, okay, 1980 came around, and on election eve, a friend of mine, he was one of my leaders in the business we had at that time, a guy named Steve Leifheit. Steve Leifheit and I were sitting there watching the returns when the press said there was 0% chance that Reagan would win. The polls said there was a 0% chance that Ronald Reagan would win. Okay, everybody said there was a 0% chance that Ronald Reagan would win. Okay, long story short, y'all probably figured it out. Ronald Reagan won. Now, in preparation for this talk tonight, I actually went out and dug a book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I'd promote it more heavily if you could find it, but I went on Amazon. You get one copy of a used one for $36. But it's by Warren Brooks. It's called The Economy in Mind. I sat in where Andrea is right there, and I said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to thumb through this book. And it hit me, this is the most highlighted book of my life. Every page is highlighted, okay? And as I'm sitting right where Andrea is sitting right now, I end up reading the book again instead of preparing a talk. And but just right here on page, whatever it is, 23, it summarized what just happened to us. Let me read this, okay? Here is from Jimmy Carter's farewell address, 16 January 1981. Here's part of that address. He said the rapid depletion of irreplaceable minerals, the erosion of topsoil, the destruction of beauty, the blight of pollution, the demands of increasing billions of people, all combine to create problems which are easy to predict and observe, but difficult to resolve. 4 days later, think about what I'm saying here. 4 days later, Ronald Reagan, in his inaugural address, said this: "It is time for us to realize that we are too great a nation to limit ourselves to small dreams. We're not, as some would have us believe, doomed to inevitable decline. We have every right to dream heroic dreams." Now, you think about what he just said there, okay, and what just happened there. In that instant, over 4 days, America went from a self-hating, negative malaise, is what they called it back then, to this patriotic, optimistic morning in America, which is what we came to call it, okay? And what happened almost immediately is there was this infectious can-do attitude that spread across America. And as Gary can witness, he's old enough to have been there as well. It not just went to America, it spread all around the world. It started here and went around the world. All of us, not all of us, but most of us, got up on our hind legs and we just attempted to do things that were exciting. And many of the things we attempted to do, we thought were impossible. Gary and I, and that's this Steve Leifheit that was there that night, our businesses literally exploded overnight. All right. And I mean, it was just the most, I even went out, I went out and I ran a governor's campaign, a gubernatorial campaign, never having done anything like that. Why did I do it? Because we were dreaming big and thinking we could accomplish anything. It was that can-do attitude again, okay? Now, here what Ronald Reagan did. Ronald Reagan had an adverse press. They hated him. They ridiculed him all the time until he died, okay? He didn't have control of the House, the Senate, or the Supreme Court, okay? And to make things work, he and Paul Volcker had to do things that were just unbelievably unpopular, okay? They had to drive the interest rates even higher than they were to get money back so they could get inflation under control. It was, all this stuff was unpopular. But because he did, and because of the can-do attitude that was spreading around the world, just 4 years later, when he ran for a second term, listen to this, if this is almost unbelievable, but Ronald Reagan won 49 out of 50 states, okay? And that led us to 26 continuous years of progress economically, okay? Now, move ahead 43 more years. This summer, in the middle of the summer, I got a call from this Steve Leifheit that was there in 1980 with me, okay, watching the Reagan event. And out of nowhere, I say it was Steve, on my phone. I said, "Hey, Steve, what's up?" He said, "Do you know where I'm going to be on November 4th this fall?" I said, "Of course I do. You're going to be at my house." Okay. And so anyway, he was at my place. All right. Again, the United States of America, okay, was in a point of self-hating. Everybody talking down this country and how we weren't, our Constitution is no good. This is no good. Everybody's a racist, whatever. They were confused, okay? There was a malaise, there was inflation. People saying you're gonna have to learn to live on less, all right? And then the press was out there telling us that Donald Trump is Hitler or Mao or Mussolini. He was anti-democratic, yada, 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 and that he had a 0% chance to win. Well, guess what? Steve and I sat here, we had a few others, okay? And that night, we saw every swing state go his way, the House go his way, the Senate go his way, and yes, he controls the Supreme Court, or at least people on the Supreme Court are committed to the Constitution of the United States, okay? And so anyway, all of a sudden, I recall Yogi Berra's famous quote. He says, "It was deja vu all over again," okay? But anyway, it was like morning in America again. People going around doing a stupid dance and all that kind of stuff. Lions coming awake everywhere, okay? And again, that contagious can-do attitude spreading everywhere, okay? In places where you just wouldn't expect it. I don't know, the huge advantage that we have right now over the Reagan Revolution, okay, is, Donald Trump has a deep, deep bench. And Ronald Reagan was all alone. He stood alone because if you remember, historically, for him to win the first time, he had to pick a representative of the deep state, okay, deep state character himself, George Herbert Walker Bush. I have a picture with myself with him over here, so I don't want to slam him, okay. But right now, if you look at the depth of the bench that Trump has, okay, you've got Elon and Vivek and JD, and I don't want to get naming all of them, okay? Because I do want to name some of them because I'm going to warn you, okay? I used to be part of the deep state. The deep state has no soul. They have they're soulless. And they will try to kill Trump. There's no question about that because they see their whole world being shaken up when all of a sudden you get people coming in saying they're going to cut $2 trillion out of the budget or whatever, okay? However, with a bench as deep as they have, morning in America will live on, period. Now, I just want to pause because I think this story requires us all to remember it. Ronald Reagan, if you remember, was walking into the Hilton in Washington, D.C., a side door, and a guy comes out and shoots him right in the chest. He's rushed to the hospital. There's a bullet less than an inch from his heart. And of course, Reagan famously told the doctor as they were wheeling him in to operate on him, Doc, he says, remember how he talked? Doc, he says, boy, I hope you guys are all Republican, right? Okay. Anyway, he lived through that. Then you see, okay, what happened here just a few months ago. Trump is talking out in Ohio, some darn gone place, and somebody shoots him within an inch of his head, or actually hit his head, okay? A bullet snips off part of his ear. And what's he do? Okay, he pulls a Douglas MacArthur and jumps to his feet and says, fight, fight, fight. You don't do those kinds of things on the spur of the moment unless you have courage deep down. Now, Reagan had a handicap. He couldn't cut spending by one nickel. He couldn't attack the deep state or government at any level. They were only in debt $3 trillion back then, to be sure, okay? But now think about what's happening. We as a nation are $36 trillion in debt. Just to show you how big a number that is, I want you to think about this. 36 trillion seconds ago, man had not appeared on the earth yet. Let me repeat that. 36 trillion seconds ago, that's our national debt. Man had not appeared on the planet Earth yet. Okay, so you think about how much we've got to correct. It's going to be huge. But then you look at who we have on this Doge, D-O-G-E. I wish I'd pick a better name, okay? You have Elon Musk, Vivek, and you're going to have more people coming in. Elon bought Twitter, fired 80%, over 80% of the people day one, and made Twitter work better than it did before. Picture what can happen with the federal employees, who I heard the other day, that if you eliminate janitors and security men, only 1% right now are showing up to work every day because they're still worried about COVID or something. I don't know, okay? But picture how much can be done and what can be done. And I'm just going to tell you a few things that this book talks about should have been done way back then, okay? One is the Department of Education doesn't educate anybody. They regulate education. Can you imagine getting rid of the Department of Education and taking those hundreds of billions of dollars that they, I can't use the word piss away, waste would be a better word, okay? And take those monies and give them to the several states. You give that money to the 50 states and say, look, states, educate your kids. And then have some small committee in Washington, D.C. that simply sits there and says, hey, everybody, Idaho's doing this. You might want to try it. Their kids are excelling. Remember, before the Department of Education was created in 1979, the United States was #1 in the world in education. Last year, look it up. I can't remember what number, but we're down like number 39. I mean, we still can beat Zimbabwe on a good day, but that's about it. Okay. Picture what we could do in education, or one that's warmer to my heart or nearer to my heart is what happens about just deciding we're going to fund government with other ways, like a value-added tax or maybe some tariffs thrown in. Do it in ways that don't require IRS to even exist. I believe that no free country can afford to have an IRS. You really can't. Because to judge whether we are free or not, you ask the question, who is afraid of whom? Are the citizens afraid of government? Or if you're a free society, government, civil servants should be afraid of the citizenry. And you cannot have that come out right if you have an IRS with the power that they have, okay? Anyway, what's that all mean to us, okay? Well, here's what's going to happen. I promise you some of these things. You're going to see over the next year, whatever, months, I mean, it's already started. You're going to have 10 times the people. First of all, America's going to have, already has hope. Hope is emerging. When you have hope, you're going to find 10 times the number of people in the looking zone that you did a year ago. 10 times, or maybe even 20 times more. People with jobs, even good jobs, are all of a sudden they're going to say, boy, I feel like I'm being left behind. I know a dentist over there that's out building houses right now. He's tripled his income. And here I am, a dentist, still looking in these people's mouths, okay? Whereas a year ago, they say, praise Jesus, I'm a dentist. Now all of a sudden they're saying, I see these people succeeding. I feel like I'm missing out, okay? And most of them, not all of them, I'm not saying you're not going to get rejection, but most of them, okay, don't have a plan B, all right? Now, with hope, here are three things I promise you are going to come to fruition. I'm going to list them and tell you how they impact. Number one, you're going to see a resurgence of faith. Every time you have hope, hope is adolescent faith. You have faith explode. And that's why the economy explodes. Here's a quote I just wrote down just before I got up here. George Gilder said way back then in here, he said, when faith dies, so does enterprise. He's an economist, right? Well, what's going to happen, and he talks about it in this book, okay, is that especially your fundamental religious groups are going to explode. Gary and I, Gary could attest to this. Back in the day, in the 80s, when it came to what country should we go work, we would look and we picked one fundamentalist Christian group. Okay, and I'm not trying to promote Christianity here tonight, but it was the Assemblies of God. Wherever in the world they were growing the most, the economy was booming the most, they had the most hope. Okay, so that's number one thing you're going to see. Number two thing you're going to see is family values are going to go through the roof. The number of kids that the average woman will have are going to skyrocket. All right, think about this. You go back to 1938. Let's just say during the Great Depression, the average woman in America was having 1.7 kids. Well, it takes 2.1 just to replicate your population. After World War II, everybody was positive. We won. We're victorious. They came home from World War II. Moms, age of my mom, had an average of 4 kids per mom. Okay. All of a sudden, families, okay, will start asking, they won't ask the question, how many kids can I afford to have? They start saying, how many kids, because they have hope, they start saying, how many kids, all right, how many kids do we want to have sitting around a Christmas table 15, 20 years from now? They're looking toward the future, okay? Those two things I promise are going to happen. The third thing is you're going to find economic freedom exploding. You're going to find prosperity, okay, going through the roof, all right? The book title, The Economy in Mind, basically what that says and what it means is this. Physical things don't create wealth. I could prove to you statistically that nations that don't have resources have more money than nations that do have resources, okay? What creates wealth, okay, or economic increase is that vast untapped potential of creative thinking, right? And all creative thinking comes from an individual, from one mind. Elon Musk, one brain is creating all of that explosive stuff. And when you have all of a sudden millions of Americans or millions of people around the world, okay, becoming, hopeful and optimistic, all of a sudden you're going to find tons of them out there coming up with bright new ideas. By the way, just to show you that I believe in what I'm saying, I'm not doing this just to show you my six-pack, but this is my new T-shirt. Diana Hand, she's on here, I'm sure, made this for me. This is free enterprise, what people do when left alone, Tyler J. Libby, all right? Now that quote I sort of stole from Milton Friedman. He said capitalism is all of that, but I changed it to free enterprise so Diana could claim that was my quote, okay? Now, here's a couple of things I want to read to you real quick, okay? And then I'm going to be done. I'll be done on time, guys, promise you, okay? Big government invariably leads to the destruction of our ability to govern ourselves, okay? I want to read something by Alexis de Tocqueville, written back in the 1830s when he came to study America. And he's talking about this government power and what it can do. He was more or less talking about what it was doing in France at that time. He says, such a power does not destroy, but it prevents existence. It does not tyrannize, but it compresses, enervates, extinguishes, and stupefies a people until each nation is reduced to be nothing better than a flock of timid and industrial animals of which government is the shepherd. I'd read that 10 more times, but I don't want to run out of time. He goes on to say, throughout history, far more slavery has been just accepted and not imposed on people, okay? Brooks, in the book, he calls it the seduction of serfdom, okay? The fake promise that security, okay, of security over opportunity is another way of putting it. The false hope of freedom from responsibility, okay? But what they actually gain is not freedom from responsibility, okay? They gain slavery to the state and or big corporation that they're working, okay? Now watch what's going to happen here in the very, very near future. I promise you, this is happening already, okay? Once sheep see those escaping the bonds that hold them, whether those bonds are the bondage of, you know, a rat job or maybe government dependence, whatever it is. Once they start seeing a trickle of people escaping, they see a counterpart become financially free. Maybe it's their boss and they work for the government, okay? Or they see they're a doctor and they see a fellow doctor all of a sudden out there enjoying life, living on the beach in Hawaii. They see these things start to happen, okay? And all of a sudden, they feel like they start a flood. It feeds on itself, if you will. The more the merrier. And all of a sudden, it becomes like everybody's running for prison. Okay, I mean, I could so clearly, Gary could tell you the same thing. I could remember that sensation, okay? It was like we were in a prison. And it was like we saw these people escaping everywhere, okay? And all of a sudden, they got to the point, even the weakest of sheep that were in prison or in bondage rose up and said, whoa, maybe I could do that. And we had that economic boom that happened after Ronald Reagan took office in 1981 that lasted until 2008 to some degree or the other. I want to convince you, guys, that this is your time. It's our time, okay? All the ingredients are present for what you need, okay? The national mood, we've already talked about, the spreading of optimism is there. To common sense, you're 5 years old, all right? If this had happened, if this emergence of optimism had happened when you're 1 year old, probably wouldn't have worked. You wouldn't have had enough credibility. But common sense has a solid foundation. They've got people making, I don't know, Joe could verify it, what, 20,000 a month? Not a lot. But we've got people making money. They have a stable platform. And so what I'm saying is common sense has become a viable plan B for most people, not everybody yet, okay? And I'm just going to suggest tonight that you do something a little different. I'm going to suggest that you tweak what you're doing, that you go out there, instead of just saying, look, we have products that will reduce your pain, which we do. I take muscadine, I have zero pain in my right shoulder, it's gone, okay? So I and I wear this, whatever it is, well, it's a watch. But anyway, I'm into the products, I understand that. But change that approach, okay, to this is the opportunity that'll set you free. And oh, by the way, we have products that will reduce the pain, okay? basically what I'm trying to communicate when it's morning in America, show people the brightness of the morning light. Okay, show them the American dream, if you will. All right, that's what we're all about. That's what we have to offer. Okay, and then lastly, stand up on your hind legs. Okay, be the lion. Okay, the lion, if you will, that goes all in. Okay, and again, I have a man crush on Elon Musk. So I have to tell an Elon Musk story. Okay, here's a guy who goes all in on everything. Okay. He sets the example over and over and over again for us, whether it's SpaceX or Tesla. Okay. I heard him say before this election, he fully expected that if Donald Trump did not win, that the government would destroy his empire. And he said he suspected he would end up becoming imprisoned by them. He threw it all in anyway. Since the election, okay, Elon Musk's net worth has gone up by over $60 billion. In other words, since then, his net worth has gone up 40 times greater than Taylor Swift's total net worth just the last couple of months, because he went all in. He threw all of his chips on the table, okay? And I'm telling you guys, that all it takes for you to join this movement is what Batterson calls, okay, is to display that 20 to 30 seconds of insane courage. And I could use examples, okay, I talk about the fact that Debbie and I were on stage one time when out of nowhere, I committed to thousands of people that I was going to take a motorcycle from coast to coast next year, never having sat on a motorcycle, not having a license. And it was in the middle of the winter. And I had a few months in which to go get a license, learn how to do all of that, okay? And I was scared to death, okay? But I decided I was going to do it, all right? And then went out and did it. And when I did do it, okay, all of a sudden people who never even wanted to sit on a motorcycle, Gary, ask him about it sometime. He wanted nothing to do with motorcycles. But all of a sudden he's on the motorcycle following us, going across America, okay? And I just want to go back and point out another Trump story of a sort, okay? Talking about this 20 to 30 seconds of courage. You do realize, don't you, that when Trump was shot in the ear and he's laying down there and they were smothering him, he forces them off and stands up. He stood up, not knowing whether whoever had that gun, the assassin, was dead or had a bead on him. He stood up all by himself and went, fight, fight, fight. Again, courage like that, all right, is what you need to have for 20 or 30 seconds. It's nothing that it's just you make a commitment once and just, I love the quote because it says it all. Just decide that you don't care if it's going to hair lift the boogeyman. This time you're going to raise up on your hind legs. You're going to plunge in, okay? And you plunge in and you start running into this business, I promise you what. The followers will follow. They will appear. Okay. Anyway, God bless.